Good evening, folks. I make it 6 o'clock. It's Carl Maria. Um, this is the national um, support session for Entrepreneurship 3A. And I'm going to work through the assignment with you, give you some background on what you should be looking at, how you should approach the assignment. This assignment is quite a tricky one. It's got quite a lot of work in it, and it's a bit different than other assignments that you've done previously. But yes, let's take a deep dive. Let's get into it. I will also, at the end of this talk, address the issue around your ICE tasks. So, key points. According to the PAS I have, this assignment is due on the 3rd of May. That makes it about 3 weeks from now. But check your PAS for updates. I know there are new PASs coming out, I think this Friday. So just before this weekend or just after this weekend, there'll be updated PAS going out. The updates are mostly to do with second assessments and submission dates, supplementary dates, and so on. But just have a look at that PAS in case there's a change to that date. But as of now, I checked it this afternoon. It is the 3rd of May. Okay, due at 9 o'clock in the evening. You know the drill, late is late. So you need to make sure that you hand it in early, enough time for SafeAssign to do its thing, and that you can check your plagiarism and so on. Please, guys, in the times we live in, consider load shedding. Load shedding is not considered an excuse for late handing. If you can't hand in due to load shedding, the argument is that you should plan ahead. And we all know how quickly load shedding changes these days. So I would give myself ample time. So I would actually aim for about the 2nd of May. The 1st of May, if I'm not mistaken, is on a Sunday. That's a public holiday. It rolls over to the 2nd of May, if I'm not mistaken, which is the Monday. And that 2nd of May, that evening, I would hand it in. You can still then on the 3rd, if you've got time, have a quick look over it and so on and update your hand in, but then at least you've got something handed in. And as you will learn, there are two things that you need to hand in. And yeah, that could complicate things slightly. The SafeAssign is in play. You'll have to do your SafeAssign and make sure that your plagiarism isn't too high on that. I'm not too fazed by what the SafeAssign says. I don't look at the numbers. I look at where it comes from. And that's the important part for me. So you could have 10% that's all copied directly, and that would be a problem. You could have 45% that's small bits here and there that comes from all over the show, and you're fine. Referencing, I don't know what your other lectures have been like in terms of referencing and how they have dealt with referencing up to this point. I am a stickler for referencing. I've said this before to other classes. I make a living out of my brain, out of my intellect, and therefore I consider intellect a very important factor. And I don't like people not getting recognized if their intellectual property is being used. And therefore I take referencing very seriously. So please make sure that you reference correctly. If you're not sure how or what you need to do in terms of referencing, get in contact with the information center, the library, and they'll be able to assist you. And please note that you hand in one report. So the second part is one report. It should not be dealt with as question by question. It should be dealt with as a report. And I'll get to that a little bit later in a bit more details. You have 2,000 to 2,500 words. That's a hard limit. So please be sure that you stick within that for the report. Do not go over that, as the instructions are that we do not mark more than that. Okay, so some background around where this assignment comes from and what is expected of you. In, I think it was 2012, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, were agreed upon in the United Nations. And these were 17 goals that the world would strive to achieve by 2030. And the idea was that all the countries in the world would sign up to this and try to achieve these goals and work towards these and focus their attention towards these goals. So, and you can go through them and you can read up what they're about. They're very ambitious goals, basically simply to make the world a better place for everybody that inhabits it. In 2022, during the president's State of the Nation address, he highlighted six goals for South Africa. So no poverty. In other words, everybody should be able to look after themselves. Everybody should be able to know where the next meal comes from. Everybody should be able to earn a living and put a house over a roof over their heads and have a place to stay. Zero hunger. In other words, and obviously hunger and poverty go hand in hand. So everybody should know where the next meal comes from, and we should have long-term food security, and be able to make sure that nobody goes to bed hungry. Good health and well-being was the third one. So there should be a healthcare system that looks after everybody, irrespective of what your socioeconomic status is, irrespective of where you live. If you live in the far rural areas, that should not limit your access to healthcare. Your healthcare, there should be healthcare available to you. Then we skipped 4, which was, I think 4 is good education, but we skipped that one. And in the typical South Africa method, we popped in affordable and clean energy. In other words, we should have energy that's affordable. So everybody should have access to electricity and be able to afford that access. And the way in which we generate electricity should be clean. In other words, we shouldn't be polluting the environment because we're generating electricity. Gender equality, something we have strived for many years across the world and still not achieved for some obscure reason, is also on the list. And then lastly, clean water and sanitation. And if you look at all of these goals, they all sort of one way or the other link to each other, or most of them link to each other. So everybody needs to have a toilet, running water, and running water that is potable, in other words, that you can drink. So these 6 issues were chosen for the South African context, for those that we would prioritize out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The idea with this assignment is then that you choose one of these topics, and you then go and consider a mobile app. They talk about a mobile IT application in the assignment that will address this issue in one way or another. So let us, for example, take, and I'm going to take one that's not there, access to education. So say that was one of the priorities. You could, for example, have created an app, and guys, when I say create an app, just to calm you down, you don't have to create the app. You don't have to build the app. As a matter of fact, you should not build the app. Listen carefully, you should not build the app. The app should be something that is an idea, but it's not something that you should actually build. But you should come up with an app that you would be able to be used. So in the case of, if it was education, for example, access to education, um, I could come up with an app, and the idea on the app would be there would be many introductory courses on the app. I would approach universities and other tertiary institutions to give me free access to certain of their basic courses that could then be made available to people um, across the country, especially those in rural areas. I would also approach libraries and publishing houses to make certain materials free via the app. And this then could lead to people being able to access education um, anywhere. And then that would be my idea. And then, as you'll see, as the assignment developed, I would then take it further. So the first part of the assignment, which is a 30 marks of the 100, so 30%, is a presentation that you have to do. This presentation needs to be a recorded video of 5 to 7 minutes. They don't say what you have to and have not got to do. I would expect that you would have some kind of a talking head, in other words, a camera to start off with, a face or something like that if you want to. If you don't want to, it's up to you. And then a slide presentation. There's many places where you can do slide presentations. PowerPoint is the obvious um, place, but there's many other very interesting tools that you could use to present slides on, or to present. And you could do with a video exactly whatever you want to. Well, you can set it up. What you need to do in the video, your video should be a pitch to government. And the idea is that you, in inverted commas, sell the idea of this app. You explain the app and you explain the solution and why it is a solution to whichever one of the problems that you have determined is a problem. You'd obviously have to give some background of the problem. You probably have to do a little bit of research so that we know how big is the problem, what is the problem in South Africa exactly. So in the presentation, the requirements are that you give a name for the business and a logo. They give you the tools in the assignment where you can go look for names and logos that are already in use, and the specific instructions you may not use one that has already been used. You need to then give your app a unique name, give the explanation of the design and usage, what it would do, and then obviously address the sustainable development goal you've chosen. So that's what you need to do. That's your app and your presentation. To help you, there is something called the pitch deck. If you go into additional resources and lecture notes, I've put extensive notes on supplement B. Supplement B is part of your textbook, and the pitch deck tells you different ways of how you can pitch business ideas to an audience. So you should base what you're doing to sell the idea on the information in the pitch deck. It's specifically included in both the textbook, and as I said, I've given you extensive notes on the pitch deck so that you know how to go about pitching the business. So that's the first part. That's the first thing you're handing. The second part that you're handing is a complete report. This report is 60 marks, and I say 60 plus 10. The reason for the plus 10 is there is 10 minutes for, or 10 marks for layout, what it looks like and so on. So this is a report. So please understand, although there are questions posed in the assignment, you must do this as a report to government, a essay format if you wanted. And this should have an overall introduction, the body that is formed by your different questions. And I would even be careful on how I number it. And then a conclusion at the end. And throughout, synthesis needs to take place. If you've done a proper structure and you're clear on what your descriptions are and so on, there's an additional 10 marks that gets evaluated for that. You will see there are 4 questions for 60 marks, so I'll make it roughly 15 marks per question. What are these questions? So the first question that you need to deal with is you would have to discuss the forms of entrepreneurship, which is in Learning Unit 1, and determine which form of entrepreneurship you would believe will be best suited for your, or best suited for your mobile IT application. In other words, which one of the different forms of entrepreneurship, and be careful, guys, go look at what the forms of entrepreneurship are within this course, and be sure that you understand the forms of entrepreneurship, and choose one, give reasons why you choose one, explain why it's suitable, explain why it's suitable to this specific venture, and yeah, you have a bit of freedom as long as you give the basis of what the background is of the form of entrepreneurship, and then link it back to your app and why your app will function the best within that form of entrepreneurship. The second one is the entrepreneurial method. The entrepreneurial method is something that is unique to this curriculum and to the textbook, and that's the whole section on the entrepreneurship as a method rather than a process. And you need to apply the entrepreneurial method to your app and say, how would you apply the entrepreneurial method? The third question has to do with the funding. How will you fund this? As you're aware, there's various methods of funding. You need to go look at the methods of funding. Select 3 methods of funding. Tell me why and how you would use those fundings. And explain in the order in which, in other words, which would be most preferred to you, least preferred of the 3 methods, so that you are able to look at why and how. And obviously, if you look at the work, you'll understand that the form of entrepreneurship would also have an influence on the funding model that you would use. Sorry. The question 2.4, and these 1, 2, 3 almost run by learning unit. The last one is, I think segmentation is in unit 3. This talks to the market. And the question that is asked here is, if you have selected one of the SDGs to solve, you would obviously have access to a larger section of the market that is, and of the population, and the population that is affected by this sustainable development goal. You would then have to indicate what is the size of the segment, how would you identify the customer, how easily would you be able to identify them, and then how accessible are the customers within that segment. That's your report. You would then have to write a conclusion and a ending to that report, and that will then be the part 2 that you hand in. At this point, I would have called for questions, and we could have had a nice long discussion around what, the how, and the why of the assignment. Unfortunately, none of you could attend tonight. So I will move on to the ICE tasks and explain the ICE tasks. I've uploaded ICE tasks so far, ICE task 1 to 5, and the ICE tasks run per learning unit. So each learning unit has a ICE task in it. These ICE tasks are each valued at 30 marks, and you have 30 minutes to complete these ICE tasks. They are in the ICE folder under more resources. It's a timed ICE. You can attempt them multiple times. And I've specifically decided on this because part of my job is to get you guys to the exam and get you to pass an exam. You have not had much experience of writing an exam timed at a mark a minute, where you've got to write 120 marks in 120 minutes in a closed book, sit down on-campus exam, as you will this year or this semester. I've therefore decided to do the ICE tasks all as timed mark a minute ICE tasks to assist you in preparing for these assessments that you will have to do. Keep in mind that you must do at least 4 of those by the deadline. The deadline, unfortunately, is not known at this time. I'm still waiting to find out exactly when the ice are due. I suspect late May is probably going to be the date that we have to hand in the ice, and by then you'll have to have completed the necessary ice. I would suggest that you do each one of those ice in preparation for the exam. I'm also considering doing 1, maybe 2 120 mark exam questions in a similar manner to those ice tasks to help you to prepare for the exams, because I do think you will find it daunting to sit down and write those exams within the time limits that we have. But I will let you have the deadlines as soon as I can. Guys, this is a short but sweet session. As always, I'm available for you to ask me your questions. It would be nice to have a discussion around the questions now and to be able to go into more depth based on what your inquiries are about the questions. Unfortunately, that's not possible. So feel free to email me. I am available to reply to your emails and so on. I will not respond to emails where you send me your actual assignment and ask me, how does this look, or can you please give me some feedback on the assignment? If I look at one of your assignments, I must take everybody's assignment, give everybody feedback before the time, and that simply is not doable. If you have got an idea for an app and you want to sort of ask me, listen, yeah, is this a good idea? Try to send me 2 or 3 ideas and tell me why you think you want to try this idea, and I'm happy to give you a little bit of feedback on that. But I can't, as long as you keep in mind, I can't mark it before the time. In terms of the assignment, 5 to 7 minutes is quite a long video clip, and then you still have to do a 60-mark assignment. It is something that I would suggest you get cracking at sooner rather than later. This is not something you can do a weekend before the time, because there's a lot of work that you've got to do behind the scenes to figure out which one of the SDGs you're going to tackle, and then how you're going to tackle it, why you're going to tackle it, how bad is the problem, which part of the problem, because all of those are big problems, and it's unlikely that you're going to be able to address the complete problem. You would therefore have to select which part of the problem you're going to do, and then research that part of the problem. As in my example I did earlier on education, that would simply be accessibility to education would be the one part of education that I would address. Okay, folks, good luck. I think this is an exciting assignment, although I do think it's a nice and challenging one, but it's appropriate for the 3rd year level of this module. Drop me an email if you need some help. All the best. Chat soon. Cheers. Coddles out.